You look great. You look dynamite.
Great. Great, thank you. What is Facebook Live?
I mean, not
He means
Facebook Live,
YouTube
YouTube
Live.
Live.
YouTube. You recording?
How are you, neighbor Lewis?
How are you?
I'm scared.
Okay, we don't talk about fear. Fear is lack of faith.
Fear is lack of faith. I'm not that. I guess I'm not that faith.
I'm kidding around. I hate when people say that fear is lack of faith.
Oh,
It drives me crazy.
Very good. That's very
The reason I
good.
say that is because if you believe God's big, I believe God's big enough for me to be in fear and faith.
That's good. That's good. I like that. How are you over there? Out there in Big Bear.
He's not
I'm not in Big Bear. I'm at my mother's house.
Where does mother live?
Mom lives in just north of Glendale.
Oh, well, that's not far from LA.
Okay, so
Nope,
you guys ready to
not
start? We are live streaming. I want to welcome everybody. To the world according to Ben Stein, and you just got an extreme close-up of Ben Stein. And of course, joining us tonight is the other Ben, not in Big Bear, but managing editor of AM Greatness, Ben Boychuk.
Great to be back. Good to see everybody. Hope
Ben.
everybody had a happy
Good to see you, Ben. Good to see you, Ben. We've missed you.
you. And of course, Nixon historian, trivia king, the most esoterical man in America, Louis Fine.
Just esoteric. I don't think there's such a word as esoterical.
You know, it works.
The sniggler.
It's part of the Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, that's fun.
And of course, actor, lover, sinner, friend, family man, attorney, America's humble servant, Ben Stein. I want to welcome everybody that's listening tonight on YouTube and watching us. I want to thank everybody and remind everybody to follow us at The World According to Ben Stein on YouTube, The World According to Ben Stein on Facebook, and of course on Parler at Ben Stein. We have a lot to talk about. I hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving. Of course, let's wish Ben a happy belated birthday. We wished them a happy pre-birthday the other day. But
Thank you very much.
And you turned 76. You don't look a day older, Big Hoss. And
old.
You're not old. You just rode hard. And
put away when, as they say.
Yes. And tonight's topic, there are many topics, but I want to get to the Supreme Court decision in the beginning in New York, which is really important. Ben and I were on a car ride home a couple weeks back, and we were talking about the Bushes, who we both supported. Not much anymore as far as I go, but we were talking about what did they do right? And because at that point I was thinking of the two biggest mistakes these two men made, I mean, other than the wars, were their Supreme Court picks. So you had Bush number one, who picked David Souter.
And Clarence Thomas. Thomas was a good pick.
No, he was 1 for 2, right?
We agree. Yeah, we agree. We all agree with that. We love Clarence Thomas.
But let's get to David Souter. Couldn't have been a worse for the Conservative Party. Secondly, not only was he a terrible pick, he decided to retire in 2009. Give him 2 years earlier, the older Bush, who obviously picked John Roberts, and yes, he picked Alito, so he was 1 for 2, just like his father. But the two that he picked, the two that they both picked, couldn't have destroyed with the courts. I mean, the damage, Ben, that they did with those two picks is.
Yeah, they're terrible picks. I have a tiny inkling of how these picks get made because people I went to law school with were at a certain point pickers, so to speak, not nose pickers, but pickers of Supreme Court nominees. And they pick very, very smart guys who did well in law school to help do the picks, but they don't, as I'm not going to steal a little bit of Judith's thunder, they don't go with their gut and just pick who seems to be a solid, rock solid conservative. They go with opinions, which are a very important thing, and letters and lectures and speeches while they're on tour, and they do not get what is the essence of these people's heart and soul. And in the case of Souter, if I may say this, I could tell right away that he was not what one might call a straight shooter. As far as Roberts, I don't know. He just looked like a guy who wanted to be a socialite. He just wanted to blend into the Washington party scene. That was what he shouted to me, and he did. I was not wrong about that.
Ben Boychuk.
Sorry about that. Well, I agree. Roberts, I remember the summer of the Roberts confirmation hearing, and I was in an event, and the late great Harry Jaffa was there, and Jaffa, in case people don't know, Jaffa was probably the premier scholar of Abraham Lincoln of the 20th century, in a lot of people's opinion. I mean, he wrote 2 very, very important books. And he also contributed the line to Barry Goldwater's acceptance speech, extremism in defense of no liberty is no vice. That was Jaffa. And Jaffa was railing against Roberts at this thing. And he said, what do we know about him? We don't know anything about him. We can't trust him. And, his acolytes together.
Absolutely incredibly important point.
Yeah.
You mean the Bushes went against?
By the way, that's exactly what I would say about Joe Biden, but
sure. Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah,
I was going to say 1 second. The Bushes, George W. used bad intelligence. I am shocked about that.
Yeah.
And Louis, what are your thoughts on the matter? Because I know you've been scouring with this with the court stuff. So
I'll never miss an opportunity to bash John Sununu and Hugh Hewitt. The latter is a hack who, when Roberts was picked, and some conservatives, to their credit, expressed skepticism. He said, not to worry, I worked with this man at the Department of Justice. He clerked for Judge Friendly. He is an excellent pick. And the other, David Souter, I don't know his personal politics, but if I were to venture a guess, I suppose he is a near extinct a representative of a near extinct species of New England Yankee republicanism. And he was pushed aggressively by both Sununu and Warren Rudman, the Sununu being the former governor of New Hampshire, Rudman the senior senator from New Hampshire at the time. And it should have been a considerable tell that, based on his upbringing, his education, and paucity or poverty, whichever word you prefer, of opinions on certain issues, that he would probably not be to the liking of conservatives or those who have a specific reading of the Constitution in line with Scalia more than, say, Clarence Thomas, because there's a difference between the two that goes more than skin deep.
Ben, I will get back to you. Louis just brought up a point, which is anytime I feel like a Republican or a pundit on a show says, trust us, they're okay, we should run for the hills as fast and as far as we can.
Well, I will say that the only kind of Republican pundits that they put on talk shows pretty much are ones that the liberals can trust and can trust to do their business. I mean, I look at the talk shows and I see on them, not anywhere near as often as I used to, but I used to very often, my old boss, a great, super nice boss, Dave Gergen. But when they have him on as a Republican, that's really comical. And I don't see many Republicans on that I think of as being real Republicans. Now, maybe that's going to change, and maybe my vision is impaired. But I don't see many Republicans on whom I would trust choosing a Supreme Court justice. Certainly nowhere near as well as we trusted Mr. Trump's gut, who's worked incredibly well.
So, Ben, I want to ask you a question, though. Let me ask you a question, because, and I want to set the record clear to people out there in all land. Ben was never a Trumper. He was a pro-Lindsey Graham. And I
love Lindsey Graham. And I'll tell you why. For one simple reason. He's big on defense. I think defense is a tremendous issue.
Right. But the second that Trump was nominated, you voted for Trump. and I was with you on election night celebrating, just for the record, just to clear the record. But I want to know how you personally got out of that world of those people on TV, of, the poll, because you're a Republican and you're an old school Republican, how you managed to change your views on many things.
Well, I'm old, so that's one way. But I never had any doubt that Trump was an incredibly capable guy. I never had any doubt that he was going to be stronger on defense than his opponent. I never had any doubt that whatever ethical problems he had, and I knew his ethical record better than most because I'd written about him for Barron's. He was a prince of a guy. He was Mr. Clean compared with Hillary or anybody in the Clinton world. So it wasn't a contest at all. And had he been running against Abraham Lincoln, say, I might have chosen Lincoln, but he wasn't running against Lincoln. I mean, once the Democrats had chosen Hillary, any Republican would have been better.
And you've been one of his biggest advocates for the past 4 years.
And I'm still an advocate, and I'm personally hoping that if, in the event that the things go the way it looks like they're going, and he is cheated out of high office, I hope he stays in the political arena as long as possible and starts moving mountains the way he did them in 2016.
And that's for the next segment. We will discuss the courts. Actually, I mean, I think every conservative, and I'll go to you, Louis, right? Every conservative this week had to look at it and go, finally, we got one decision our way.
Oh, I don't even think you have to look at it that way. And I would argue that you shouldn't look at it that way. The majority opinion is a review of the facts. And if you look at the facts as presented, I know this is it's not a trial court, of course, but the situation in New York and the selective enforcement of the law, strip clubs, yes, bars, yes. Strip clubs weren't cited, but bars, yes. Right. But churches and synagogues, no, that's not a hard call. New York, the state of New York would have had a much stronger case if they had said to the court, we have created no exceptions. There are no exemptions for this religion versus that religion, for this retailer versus that retailer. It was their deliberate and purposeful enforcement against
religion,
Hasidic Jews on the one hand, Catholics and Christians, Catholics in particular and Christians in general, that made this a very easy call. You could look at this and pose the question to whoever was arguing it for the state of New York: why are churches and synagogues closed and retailers, big box retailers, are allowed to
That's a great question.
Business as normal?
Louis, you are asking for common sense. I mean,
but that's what Justice Gorsuch pointed out.
But Lewis is making an incredibly important point, which, had it gone another way, would have been giant blazing headline in the New York Times and the Washington Post and even in the Wall Street Journal, which is the Supreme Court at long last has stood up for religion and has stopped the movement of the courts in this country to smash religion as hard as they could. The courts in this country have been anti-religion, anti-God for so long. It's insane. We've gotten used to it. We no longer even blink an eyelash when the courts of this country take a firm stand against religion and against worship of God. Why is that? We're not even surprised by it. We're surprised when the courts stand up for freedom of religion. That is how bad a state we've come to. We don't care if the Supreme Court spits on religion. We're stunned if they make even a small gesture in defense of religion.
Ben Boychuk, who appears to be having audio and technical issues.
You want me to speak for him?
Go for it.
Yeah, so if you're the mayor of New York City, here's a rule of advice. If you impose a lockdown, enforce it. Don't selectively enforce it and make it a point to rub it in the face of a particular group of believers, a religious sect that happens to be, in this case, Hasidic Jews, where you send people from the Parks Department to weld shut a public
Wow.
park that is
Wow.
in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, so Jews cannot use it because you don't want them gathering in public. And if you're the governor of New York, don't hold a press conference in which you say, I will not only close the synagogues, I will close their businesses. Not all synagogues, the synagogues of this particular group of Jews in this particular neighborhood. It has nothing to do, as a constitutional matter, when the court hears it, with religion or belief. It has to do with equal enforcement. The rule about no one being above or below the law, to come back to Abraham Lincoln, is true. You can't selectively enforce the law and expect the courts to say that's all right.
And if you just tuned in,
They
you are.
have been unfortunately, Louis, as we know, the courts have been doing exactly that. Finally, with this incredibly brave new woman on the court, they have stood up on their hind legs and said, we're not going to spit on the First Amendment anymore.
And I want to get that after Ben. I want to get back to the activism of all of this and how this was all created, because it wasn't created by the right. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody on this Friday night for listening to us on our YouTube channel, The World According to Ben Stein. Ben Boychuk, if you're all fixed up, can you tell people where they could find us?
Well, you can like us on Facebook if you happen to still be on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. If you want to listen to the audio version of this show, you can find us just about every platform that hosts a podcast, from iTunes to Spotify to Stitcher. And there seems to be like 3 or 4 others that I always forget, and I don't have my notes in front of me. But we encourage you to find and share the audio version of this. And of course, most importantly, follow us on Parler at Ben Stein.
Please do. And I want to welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. This topic of judges really bothers me. I mean, I think the topic of judges
should.
No, go ahead. And it bothers me, I think, because in the land of Trump, we all have our own different agendas. Ben, you're extremely pro-life. Some people are extremely pro-gun. There's this whole mixture in this cabal, in the grouping of Trumpicans. But the one thing that the left has seemed to do better than anybody, or the Democrat, but they are all of the left, is using the court as a weapon. And that's why we're at where we're at now, Ben.
Well, they use the court as a weapon because the court allows itself to be used as a weapon. The court says, here we are. If you'd like to slap the First Amendment down, here we are. We're going to help you slap down the First Amendment, especially about the establishment of religion. We're going to make it really easy for the atheists and the agnostics to slap down the people who believe. And unfortunately, this has been going on for a long time. I was incredibly privileged to have Robert Bork, as my constitutional law professor at Yale, and he made a very, very, very good point that you just made, which is that Mr. Lewis Fine just made, which is you absolutely have to have uniform enforcement. If you're going to say some houses of worship can be open and some can be closed, you should be knocked out of court immediately. You should be laughed at or sneered at by the judges, who should say to you that that's just not possible. That's just clearly against the Constitution. Instead, the court for many years has said, we'll just carve out whatever we want to be an exception to the First Amendment. We'll just say that the Constitution is whatever we say it is, and we can make it turn out to be anything we want. That they did that horrifyingly in Roe versus Wade, the consequences of which are still just too breathtakingly awful to think about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to ask it because it's a factual question, and I don't have an answer for it because I just didn't get a chance to read the opinions. But and as much as I love to bash Chief Justice John Roberts like everybody else, Lewis, maybe did you get far enough to read what Roberts wrote, why he joined the liberals on this decision this week?
I did not.
Okay.
I will read it. I have every intention of reading it.
I'm very glad you're bringing it to our attention.
Well, I think Ben brought it up best. He wants to be invited to the dinner party.
He's got that, but and I understand that, but what I was hoping for, and maybe if somebody in the chat or in the YouTube comments has actually taken the time to read the opinion. If so, God love you.
They're more concerned with your audio issues, and one of them said you need to learn sign language.
Well, wait a second, but can I back up a second
yeah.
on what I was saying about the being wanting to be invited to parties? When I lived in Washington a long time ago, I was invited entirely courtesy of my mother and father, who are much more important people in Washington than I was, to various parties at the high end of the Washington party circle, and people do anything. They'll crawl on razor blades to be invited to these parties and to say, yes, of course I'm going to the Queen's birthday party at the British Embassy. Of course I'm going to Bill Sapphire's breaking fast party for Yom Kippur. People will go to a lot of trouble to be invited to those, and if it takes betraying your oath to the Constitution, people will do it.
Look, yeah, Ben, go for it.
No, I've heard that a million times, and every time I hear it, it just breaks my heart every time.
It's heart, as my wife would say, it's heart rendering.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, in a sense, Trump's picks are really good picks, because they're never going to be invited to a dinner party.
Exactly.
You know, Brett Kavanaugh is never going to. We're sort of safe with Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, because those two are never. The only dinner parties they're getting invited to are maybe at Notre Dame, but I don't even think that's the case anymore. Lewis, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, the interesting question is, what type of justice would Roberts have been had Rehnquist not passed away? Because he would have been an associate justice and not the chief justice. And to what extent, as chief justice, is his role? And this is something more for a court watcher than it is for me to answer. But the question, I think, is to what extent, as chief justice, is he both a jurist and a politician? And because you represent the whole federal court system when you testify before Congress, and you're making requests for increases in spending for judges' salaries and the entire bureaucracy of the federal judiciary. So I don't know if his role would have been different and his opinions would have differed, but insofar as the concern is with, say, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act ruling, and his decision that proved to be decisive, the 5-4 ruling, if your worry should not be what the public's perception of the court is or mainstream media's perception of the court is, whether it's critical or favorable. The question is this ruling, will your ruling, controversial though it may be, is it right? Does it comport with the facts? Is it logical? Or are you arriving at a conclusion that doesn't have any basis in the text, and you're doing this to save face and maintain the media's respect for the court as an institution? So that's a political role.
I would like to respectfully and very, very respectfully say, I think you are making a false dichotomy, if I may respectfully say so, between a person being a jurist and a person being a politician. All people are politicians all the time. All people are seeking to advance themselves, advance their careers, advance their friends, advance everything they know and that's part of their lives all the time. And they can call themselves anything they want. They can call themselves saints. Anything they want to do, they want to call themselves, but they are always politicians. There's a wonderful movie out called The Two Popes. And of course, it takes a very, very left-wing line about the Roman Catholic Church. But it points out very, very much that even the Holy Father in Rome is basically a politician. And that is, if the Holy Father is a politician, then who isn't a politician?
But I want to speak to that, because
a question from YouTube, Ben, do you agree? Do you think there should be term limits for the Supreme Court or Congress?
No, absolutely not. It's a very complicated job. It takes a long time to learn it, but I think, and I've never been a fan of term limits, but I want to hear what Lewis so passionately wanted to talk about.
Okay, so with regard to the Pope, he's both the vicar of Christ and he is the head of a nation state. The Vatican is officially a nation state, so it has a political role. You could argue that his position is a contradiction in terms, because either he serves his Lord and Savior, or he leads his very small nation state, but he can't do both with consistency and fidelity. I would also argue that there have been judges and there have been justices, I think Scalia is a good example, who could care less what people think about the rulings and have said in their opinions things, Scalia in particular, that with regard to the history of the court were more in your face, outlandish, and even he was even admonished or for a gesture that he had made, not from the bench, but to my best impersonation of it, it goes something like this, that he did, and he had to explain himself.
And with the greatest possible respect to Justice Scalia, whom I had the great pleasure of knowing and being on a panel with when I was at a panel of the American Spectator, even he was advancing his agenda. His agenda was to be a rebel. His agenda was to be the guy who stands out stands out like a sore thumb. His agenda was to be the different guy, not to be the same guy. That was his agenda.
But getting back to it, you glossed over something very quickly, and I find it amazing that Bork you taught you in school.
I was so blessed to have him as my teacher. He was a genius. I mean, he was just an absolute freaking genius.
How did it affect you when he was borked?
It was horrible. It was especially horrible for me because my sainted mother was a great fan of Mr. Bork and a friend of his. I so well remember Mr. Bork sitting in the very, very, very worn green couch in my parents' living room, sitting there and explaining to my father about how the law worked. And he was a very impressive guy. Boy, my mother hated the people who borked him, and she kept on attached by a magnet to her refrigerator door a list of people who voted for him and against him. And boy, she did everything she could to hurt those people and to bother them and torture them in any way she possibly could.
Well, if you want to talk about politics,
especially Teddy Kennedy, whom I am sure of this, my mother would have killed him with a needle right through his eye if she could have.
But you know what? Kudos to the Democrats. They were prepared. Ted Kennedy's remarks don't surprise me. Joe Biden's tenure as chairman of the Judiciary Committee doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is how ill-prepared Judge Bork was, through no fault of his own, but because of the White House. They did not prepare him for this type of hearing, and he was destroyed by it.
I think there's something to that. I mean, but he is such an extraordinary genius, and it seems to be, and it is. Well, let me back up. The people who are against him were determined to be against him, no matter what he said. There's nothing he could have said that would placate the likes of Teddy Kennedy. Teddy Kennedy was a person, no conscience at all, period. And he would have been against Bork no matter what he said. There's a movie, which is my very, very favorite movie in the whole world, called Lolita, version 2. It's on videotape. There's a section called deleted scenes. And there's one scene where Lolita's mother says to her, if you don't go to church, it's going to hurt your conscience, or something like that. And Lolita says to Humbert, the man who eventually seduces her, so to speak, she says to him, "What's a conscience?" And he doesn't answer. And she says, "Well, I don't know, whatever it is, I don't have one." And that's how I felt about Teddy Kennedy and about the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee altogether.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. We're talking about the Supremes tonight, and we're talking about
Where Did Our Love Go? One of their great
we're talking about court rulings, and I find it amazing that we have to celebrate every time we get one ruling in our favor. It's mind-boggling that this is what it's come down to, is that they ruled the right way on something. But I want to steer that into the next segment, which will be, this should give us some bit of hope with the elections, that should they head to the Supreme Court, that we might have legal minds on our side. So if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody that's listening on YouTube and watching us. Ben Boychuk, who's having some glitch issues. Not like the Minion glitch issues, but baby glitch.
Wait, if you're having glitch issues, Ben, you must have several million ballots out there you could turn over to the Republican National Committee.
Yeah, they're in my mother's garage. They're all in my mother's garage.
You know what? They very well could be. Okay, because I believe they were probably in a lot of mothers' garages.
Yes, I think so too.
Storage units and garages. But Ben, why don't you tell people where they could find us?
Well, yes, thanks for tuning in to the live stream. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the bell up in the corner there. You'll get notifications of when the show is live and when videos become available. I certainly appreciate your support. Like us on Facebook, please, at The World According to Ben Stein. You can find the audio version of this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher, among others. And above all, most importantly, get on Parler. Most of you are probably already on Parler. Follow us at Ben Stein, and tell your pals to get on Parler and follow us at Ben Stein.
And I want to welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. So I brought up before Ben's brief commercial promo that there might be hope. Ben Boychuk, Ben Stein, that is, that Trump hasn't conceded yet. Obviously, there's no need for him to concede, and there are legal paths to victory. I mean, Wisconsin being one. Obviously, all these states we all believe are fraudulent. So there still is a chance, Ben.
Well, we need to talk. We've really got to talk about Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Because
there was an important ruling that came out today, Friday, from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that slaps down the Trump administration's arguments, trying to get ballots thrown out, trying to get a proper accounting of it. Now, Lewis, you've read at least some of that opinion, which just came out this afternoon.
And an analysis of the analysis, and I've now reached a different. I think the opinion I take issue with, but I have a new opinion myself about whether SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, will hear this case. I think if it's just about Pennsylvania, there's no reason for the court to grant certiorari, because it would not change the outcome of the election in terms of the Electoral College. But here's something that's very problematic about the ruling. So there were 4 points that were brought up according to the analysis, and of those 4, 3 really stand out. It's one, that Pennsylvania law requires observers, but does not require they are able to see. Now, if you're a judge and you're reviewing this case, that's a problem.
You bet.
What's then you've vitiated, we're using a lot of big words, the meaning of the word observe if you can't see. Next, suggests each ballot disregarded must be specifically challenged. Now that's not a problem if you're using paper ballots, but surprise, if you're using machines, they don't, as far as I know, keep a paper record or a reliable paper record that can be compared to what was done on the screen. So you can't contest the ballot. We've talked about this before. Let's look at those ballots to see, did people vote for Biden but not down ballot for Republicans, or did they leave that part open and vacant for president, but then they voted Republican down ballot? We won't know, because if they were machine ballots, they're gone. And then finally, this is the one that's a syllogism that just is ridiculous. The remedy is too drastic to consider. In other words, we can't review the ballots because there's the possibility, maybe even the probability, that the winner, the declared winner, did not really win the ballot.
Wow.
Ben, what are your thoughts on all that, you being the highest lawyer of the bunch?
I'm just floored at that last point that Mr. Lewis Fine just made and pointed out. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying, just terrifying. I mean, what would Thomas Jefferson say? What would Madison say? I mean, these are terrifying points that you have brought up, Lewis, and I'm just horrified by it. I'm just horrified. I'm scared to death of the whole idea of Biden's America, and this.
Of course.
This even more, the most horrifying of all.
But the language, yeah, the language is important.
Who wrote that opinion?
It's from the Third Circuit. Boychuk. Do you know who wrote the opinion?
I don't have it in front of me. My internet here is very, very
But
bad.
I would just say, make language your ally, because you have a strong case. The Trump campaign has a strong case with regard to the language of the law, because a reasonable judge should ask, wait a second, the text of your law says there must be observers. It's a requirement. But it does not require that they see anything. How can one observe if one cannot see? That's the basis of a claim. The reason I'm pessimistic, however, is because if Pennsylvania is the only state in dispute,
It's not, though.
I understand that. But if it's the only, if this comes to the court as individual cases, unless they're bundled together, and I don't know if they can be. These are legal issues that are far beyond my expertise. But if they come as individual cases, I could see the court denying a hearing, saying, look, that one state is not decisive to the outcome. So I don't know if they're going to be grouped together, and then the court has to make a decision, because the laws differ in each of those states. I don't know how they would rule on it.
This is so terrifying. One of my closest friends, maybe my closest friend, said after the election, maybe it's time for a revolution. And if this is true, if one of our highest courts is saying we are simply going to disregard the language of the law because we do not want to upset one of the political parties, we're just going to upset. Instead, we're just going to, I hate to say it, piss all over 74 million voters. That's really, really scary.
Well, that is the decision they're making. It's also the decision they're making in that will be the Senate races in Georgia, which is a topic I want to talk about also, because in Georgia, I don't care what anybody says. I'll say it right now. You have a black African American, whatever you want to call it, a real militant running in Georgia. And then you have a metrosexual Jew running in Georgia against David Perdue. And let me tell you something, unless Georgia's demographics have changed, I don't see, other than cheated mail-in ballots, I don't know how anybody, Ben, could have faith anymore in this. And I really believe that's their biggest accomplishment here. Forget about Trump. Their biggest accomplishment is making 74 million Americans believe that voting doesn't matter anymore. That with mail-in,
the Constitution doesn't matter anymore. This country. I'm reminded of something Winston Churchill said when the Japanese seized Singapore because it didn't have any guns pointing towards the jungle to protect it against a landward invasion. Winston Churchill said, "I would no more have dreamed that there would be no guns pointing landward than a battleship had been launched without a bottom." And this seems like they're saying we launched the Constitution without a bottom. I mean, it's terrifying. It's really scary.
The catch-22 that's frightening.
Louis, the Democrats have mailed out already 850. Thank you, said by the Twitter. 850,000 mail-in ballots already have been sent out in Georgia for the Democrats. And it's Ben Boychuk, what do you do? I mean, how do we fight this? People don't, they've literally, you know what it feels like right now that we're playing, remember that board game, the game of life? Yeah. And it was so spread out that you don't know where to go. You don't know which war to fight, which battle. So you have your pieces spread so thin. That's what it feels like right now. They did this massive assault on us with 6 different states in question and all these things. Where do we go? What do we do?
I don't understand why the Trump legal team, and we talked about this a little bit the other night about their really kind of poor public relations efforts in all of this and shaping the public opinion. They've just been throttled by, big tech and big media, not really able to get the message out. But it seems to me what it boils down to is just how hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of voters in these particular states that we're talking about, Pennsylvania is the one that I'm kind of sticking with for the moment, how they've been just completely disenfranchised. And that, I don't understand why they didn't make this argument in the first place in front of a judge, in which they said, the inability, that whole thing with the not poll watchers not being able to watch. So that to me is like, it's like if we were sitting around a card table right now, fellas, playing poker, and I left the room and, somebody dealt the cards while I was out of the room and I came back in and sat down. Well, that's a misdeal because, I didn't see the deal. I didn't see you deal the cards. I don't know if it was on the up and up. We need to have trust if you're going to have a kind of a working, democratic republic. And so why can't they make the argument in front of a judge or the judges or the Supreme Court and say, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have been disenfranchised for the following reasons. And we can run down the whole litany again if you want, but, and say this undermines the very foundation of the republic.
Because Lewis already explained that. Because another court said, if we did this, if we actually did what the Constitution requires us to do, it would require a result too drastic to contemplate. Namely, we'd have to throw out the election
and do it over.
And that's too drastic to contemplate, that we would actually rather live up to the Constitution than let things slide smoothly through to perdition.
And just so people know, Lewis, because actually Lewis raised this point, we often, the three of us, or if Lewis decides to add 7 people to a text thread, we're often chatting throughout the day. But somebody brought up the point in the case in Philadelphia on the YouTube channel, which Lewis told both Ben Boychuk and myself. It wasn't Giuliani that messed it up. It was the original law firm that bailed on that thing, and Rudy had to go in basically last minute, right, Lewis?
I'm not going to assume responsibility for that analysis, but yes.
I have it right here in front of me.
Yeah, well, that wasn't any of us. That came from another.
Oh.
It's a different. It wasn't any of us. Is the point? But I thought it made a very interesting point, which was that, the original law firm, which withdrew from that case in Pennsylvania, did so because there was public pressure to do so.
Well, maybe private pressure too. The scariest thing would be if there were private pressure. If there were pressure of the form of Mr. Law Partner, I know where your children go to school and they're sweet kids. It'd be terrible if something happened to them.
Right,
Lewis.
What's very scary here is, if I understand the Third Circuit's opinion, this is what's very frightening. If you're alleging misdeeds or fraud, then you have to specify or isolate the ballots that are in question. Okay, fair enough. And then you find out, and here's where the catch-22 comes into play. Oh, the machines don't have any kind of paper record or chain of custody, or wait, the CEOs of these companies have gotten ahead of all of this and come out and said, never mind what they said 2 years ago or 9 months ago, there's no tampering. Fraud isn't possible. So what can you look at? Well, this isn't like 2000, where you could actually produce ballots and say, okay, these are the ones in question, and we're going to review whether these chads are dimpled or pierced or dangling.
This is far worse. This is far.
Of course.
This is incredibly, terribly, horrifyingly bad. This is the worst news I think I've ever seen about the Constitution of this country. And you brought it up, Louis. You should get some kind of medal for bringing this up.
And I wanted to say about your point, you're right about politics exists everywhere. I was talking about I was talking more about the ideology. I think Roberts was decided as Chief Justice, or has decided that he'll play a role as sort of a budsman, is in addition to his role as a justice, which is not his job. But yes, all institutions are political without being necessarily Democratic or Republican, liberal or conservative, including any of the faculty lounges at Caltech or MIT.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Thank you, everybody, for listening tonight on YouTube and your input. I am reading as you go. But Ben Boychuk, can you please tell people where they could find us?
Well, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please do hit that bell up in the corner. If you're still on Facebook, like us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. You can subscribe to the audio version of this program on iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and any number of other platforms where podcasts are hosts. If you do subscribe to us on iTunes, please give us a nice 5-star rating and tell your friends. And most of all, most importantly, everybody get on Parler, get the hell off of Twitter, get on Parler, and follow us at Ben Stein.
I want to welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. Ben, I want to ask you a simple question. How the hell did we get here?
Well, that's a very good question. Bob Bork talked about that a lot too. We got here because little by little, the Supreme Court became a tool of the left in this country, and it started. Mr. Bork would have said, I think he's no longer with us in life, but he would have said when FDR threatened to pack the court got scared in the mid-30s during the Great Depression, and decided they would go with the liberals, and they were not going to cross swords with the liberals anymore, and they would in fact play up nice with the liberals, and then went out of nowhere. Came Roe versus Wade. Actually started with another case in Connecticut having to do with birth control devices.
Griswold.
Right, Griswold versus Connecticut, exactly. And it was once they decided that case, that was it. I mean, that was it. The Supreme Court, as an independent body, deciding whether things were in the Constitution or not, was gone. And this was a big thing.
I have something to say about the penumbras and emanations of Air
Yes.
Doctor.
Yes. I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Right. So let's come back to a point about equal enforcement, because if you read The Tempting of America, Judge Bork made an excellent point about Brown versus Board of Education, because there are many things that are legal but immoral, and there are many things that are moral that are not legal. And you can go to the King Center in Atlanta to school yourself or familiarize yourself with that point. But he made a point about Brown versus Board of Education. He said the ruling, they arrived at the right decision for the wrong reasons, because in inventing law, no matter how awful and immoral segregation was, they had a much more just rationale that they ignored. Precedent, separate but equal. He said, if you're going to apply the law in that case, it was very clear that the segregated schools were separate, but they weren't equal. The education was inferior. The textbooks were older. The facilities were inferior. Everything about it spoke to the wrongness of the law, that it wasn't consistent, and integration and the dismantling of segregation as a result was the outcome. So the court should look to the language of the law and equal enforcement. But he was, in my opinion, a giant of a man, and he was also very wrong about monopoly. And when we talk about the law firms that are abandoning Trump, this is why I have zero loyalty to corporations, because these firms are corporations and they're being threatened by their clients, or they're being threatened where the partners are being socially ostracized. And what are they doing in turn? They're dropping their clients. Well, you may not care about President Trump, and you can say, well, he's a billionaire. It doesn't matter, allegedly a billionaire. But when a lawyer is afraid to represent a client for fear of losing business or social exclusion or intimidation or threats,
or far worse,
right, then you, as a client, are denied your constitutional rights, your freedom.
Louis, let Ben jump in and respond, please.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, which Ben?
You, sir.
You're talking about something so horrible that it's out of a Godfather movie, which is judges who are afraid to take on cases because they fear for the personal safety of their families. And I think such a thing happens in small towns, probably used to happen in rural towns where a case of integration and segregation are being heard. But to think that it's reached the level of very high level federal courts, that is just absolutely terrifying. And I have the horrible feeling something like that is happening in the Trump election cases.
But the law firms that are
that's
that
what
are
I
stepping
mean with the law firms. The law firms are getting threatened, and they're saying, "Okay, we'll you want us to back off? We'll back off."
Ben Boychuk.
Well, yeah, and I think just to underscore what Louis was just saying a minute ago, you may not like President Trump or what what he's going through. You want him out of office, but the point is, if somebody with that powerful and those sorts of resources, it can happen to him, then we have no chance. If we find ourselves in trouble, and I can conceive of a million First Amendment cases, as the ideas of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of the press seem to be going into eclipse in places. That there seems to be a willingness, certainly among the generation now coming of age, to embrace censorship and to say that certain brands of speech, if they're hurtful, that speech should be outlawed. Eventually, those people they'll go to law school. They won't just be in the private sector. They'll be in the public sector. They'll become judges, and we'll have a critical popular mass in this country to revise or repeal the First Amendment of the Constitution.
It's already, clearly,
Yeah.
Clearly with the big tech communications firms, it's already happened. I mean, with the giant big tech firms who can in effect censor far more effectively than the government, it's already happened.
Yeah. But I think also what Ben Boychuk, and I'll go to Ben Stein with this, over the last 4 years, we've seen the FBI. I mean, people knew the FBI was corrupt, but we've seen them in their full on nudity of corruption. We've seen the CIA. We've seen the media. We saw
that under Nixon. We saw the CIA being corrupted.
Well, we saw the FBI, but what we've seen in the last 4 years is they are willing to do everything to destroy, as you say, the Constitution, the presidency. There is nothing left that they are not. They are willing to do anything to go scorched earth. And the question is, do Republicans, as your friend said with the revolution, is that what we have to do in return? I'm not asking you to advocate going scorched earth, but what is the response to somebody that goes scorched earth on you?
I don't think, I certainly don't know what the response is. And I have to say, if I were a judge and somebody came to me and said, "You're a very good friend, initial K, or your wifey of many years, initial A, we're going to be found in a ditch if you don't rule our way," I don't know if I would have the courage to stand up to them. I really don't.
But it goes much deeper than that, Louis. They have basically for the last 4 years assassinated a president without assassinating him. They have like tried to neuter and spade a president and do just from every single from before day one. how do you, is there any going back? Is there a normalcy to go back to?
Well, I'd stop talking about, I'd stop talking about Republicans. I think there are many establishment Republicans in and out of Washington, D.C. that will be very happy to see Donald Trump.
My bad. You're right. You get what I'm saying. Is there any going back?
Well, I mean, look, we didn't lose all those events with Trump. I mean, Trump's nominees to the Supreme Court were confirmed. Trump was not impeached and convicted. So we haven't lost everything. But the trend lines are adverse.
No, here's the difference. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right, when she was nominated, what was it? It was, I think, 3 that she didn't have.
Scalia was confirmed 99-0.
Right. Is it what they have done to the conservatives? Is Lewis? Is there any going back to normality? That's all. I mean,
I would say a lot of this has to do with the creation of the independent counsel, starting with the Watergate, and then eventually.
That's what Bork thought too. That's what Bork thought too.
Right, and then, and even though the law was allowed to lapse, we still have a Justice Department that can, regardless of who the president is, appoint a special counsel. So square that circle for me. We had an independent.
I know, and it can't be done. Once they did it to Nixon, what everyone failed to realize is they can do it to anyone. But unfortunately, we only see them doing it to conservatives. But they can do it to anyone, and the day may come when they'll do it to liberals. It hasn't done yet because the liberals operate in tandem, and they've got themselves locked up tight with the media, so the liberals cannot be hurt yet because the media won't let anyone touch them. That may change. It could be that under Biden, if Biden becomes president, which is still a big if Biden becomes president, the split among the squad and the blacks and the liberal women that split is going to become so intense that you'll see an actual special prosecutor going after some Democrats, going after some liberals. That could happen under Biden. The day may come, and sooner than he thinks, when Biden is going to be very, very sorry that he, as my very close friend says, won.
That's right. If he realizes that he did win. Ben Boychuk, is there ever going back? I mean, is there any?
Well, yeah, that's.
Ben, you're a little glitchy.
You want me to speak for him?
I could say the same for you. I apologize. I'm not up in the mountain where the internet is excellent. I'm down the hill where technology apparently is terrible. I want to echo something that Ben Stein just said a second ago. I think the implication of that would be that progressives using the tools of the bureaucracy to go after conventional liberals, because it certainly wouldn't be conservatives doing it. I mean, it's the so-called resistance against Trump within the bureaucracy was, these were, maybe some of them were establishment Republican types, but as often as not, as we know, something like 90% or 95% of political donations from Washington, D.C. goes to Democrats. And so
I know people who are in the resistance who are in my own family and my blood family, and they thought nothing of going after the president, despite the fact that it seemed clearly to be forbidden by the Constitution. The Constitution means nothing to these people, with all due respect.
Yeah.
The Constitution means nothing to them. Winning is everything to them. Winning is everything to them. And winning, it means the Constitution loses, and that is terrifying.
Well, then
we have to wrap it up. But Lewis, I wanted you to give an update on our future activity as far as our curfew break.
So we've had an amazing response to our scheduled, what would have been, I'm using the past tense, our Sunday protest.
What happened? Why was
we're overwhelmed with people that want to be there. So as a matter of logistics, and we're going to update this on Parler. We're going to give a new date, same time, same place, but we're going to make accommodation so everybody who wants to be there can be there. And we had a very, I think, excellent conversation tonight about language, and I want to just close my remarks by saying this. Anybody in this country, and with respect to whoever is a member of the resistance in your family, Air Doctor, is someone who is sitting on a couch eating Malamars. You know who was in the resistance? Elie Wiesel in Romania. You know who was in the resistance? The anti-Soviet partisans that were shooting in the streets against the Stalinists.
Yeah,
those were the people in the resistance.
Nathan Sharansky was a member of the
Natasha, Anatoly Sharansky.
Yeah. I mean, he was a member of the resistance, and you bring up a great point. That word
wearing a pussy hat is not evidence of membership in the resistance.
And on that note, Ben Stein, final words. Do we have hope? Give us hope because we need it.
Where there's life, there's hope, and I'm a little sad that nobody told me this thing on Sunday was canceled because
it's Friday. It's Friday. Today's Friday. Sunday. We're overwhelmed. Yeah, we're blessed. We're blessed.
Okay, so where's the event going to be?
It's going to be the same. It's going to be the same place, but because we had such an influx of a few different organizations that wanted to join us and melt and mold together, we are delaying it by a little bit.
And
I'm going to bring Malamars if I can find them.
And
wait a second, but so is it going to be this Sunday or not?
No, it's not, Ben. It's going to be a future Sunday. We are working on the logistics with a few different great organizations right now. And the second we have all that down, we have your chair set up. We have your Doritos, your Oreos, and for your dine out. And we will break curfew together as one. And
it's going to be the opposite of election night in Wisconsin. We've had so many people responding. We thought we owed them.
Well, then
order.
I do think somebody should have told me this. I mean, we scheduled it at outside a church, which is only a block from my house, and we chose it. I thought for that reason.
No, it's still the same place.
Okay, let me explain this one more time. So many people want to come.
Yes, exactly.
So rather than have this be chaotic, we've decided we owe it to them to make this very orderly, and maybe they should have some cookies and refreshments that we provide to.
And that's fine.
And on that note, I know Ben's kidding around with you, by the way.
Wait a minute. I'm not kidding around. Are we not having it or are we having it?
We're having it, just not this Sunday night.
Well, it's supposed to be Sunday morning.
No, that would make we're going to hang out there for 15 hours.
No, it's supposed to be at 11:59. I thought.
No, it's supposed to be. We're breaking curfew. Our curfews aren't 9:45 in the morning. Our curfews are 10 at night. And
nobody told me it was about breaking curfew. It's a pray-in. We're praying.
We're doing, but but we could break curfew and not get arrested, because it's our First Amendment right to pray outside.
Okay.
On that note, I want to thank everybody for listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank Ben Boychuk. You can find him at Parler at, tell him, Ben, I always get confused.
You also find him at Radio Shack buying a router.
Yeah, we need a new router here. You can find me on Parler at BBOYCHUK3, BBoychuk3. And of course, follow American Greatness and visit American Greatness at www.amgreatness.com.
And of course, you can find Louis Fine at L Fine or a drugstore sometimes. You could find Ben Stein at Parler at Ben Stein, and you could find us on YouTube. Please like us. Please subscribe to us on our YouTube channel at The World According to Ben Stein. Click that bell. Also, Ben Boychuk pays a lot of attention to Facebook, so please show Ben Boychuk your support at The World According to Ben Stein. And of course, I want to thank everybody that was listening tonight and for all your contributions on the YouTube channel for listening tonight. And Have a safe, great rest of your weekend. But of course, most of all, let's thank America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend. Travel well. Kyrie eleison.
God bless you. God bless you, sir.